forum seminar. This is the forum that has been recently formed. It's a collaborative initiative between CPR and Delhi University, JNU and Ambedkar University, and also some other independent researchers. The forum is essentially being set up to try and increase the widen somewhat the public discourse on education and bring in different voices and try and focus on some of the critical issues in the education sector in India today. This is our second, as I said, in the series, and today we are going to be looking at a very critical issue within education, particularly elementary education. We are all aware that the private sector has made a lot of inroads into education in the recent years, and in fact its sort of growth has been rather fast and furious, and there's not a lot of work, hardcore research really on the nature and form of private sector intervention in education, even though the range of sort of actors and players in this area has increased a lot. And I think Professor Namisan, whom we are very fortunate to have here today, has done some rather interesting and in-depth, detailed work on the low-cost budget schools, which is something that the private sector has invested in and is trying to bring into the domain of education quite rapidly. So I'm not going to take a lot of time. Professor Namisan doesn't really need an introduction. Need an introduction. She has been working in the area of education for several years. Is currently professor at the Jawaharlal Nehru University's Zakir Hussain Center for Education Studies. She will speak for about 40-45 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. Professor Namisan.
Poverty markets in elementary education is actually a theme which is a little surprising today, because normally we don't associate markets in elementary education with the very poor. But today, when we really look around us and at the landscape of education, and as I will show behind this landscape, there is a construction of a kind of a discourse and truth that the markets are likely to be the only, are likely to be the solution for education of the poor. And this is what I would really try to show you, that how powerful these discourses are coming in and trying to influence education policy. Now, prior to 2000, we have had unregulated schools. I mean, we have had unregulated schools. But over the last decade and a half, unregulated, low-cost private schools as an answer to high quality and equitable, meaning just solution to the education of the poor, which would be the right solution to meet the right to education, the development goals, Millennium Development Goals, and so on. This is in contrast to the inefficient state and the public system of education. Now you will find the language of equity, of opportunity, of gender equality, all of this is brought into this. At the same time, what is being emphasized is this is also a business option. This is also an opportunity for business groups to also get profit, but also provide low-cost private schools for the poor. Now here the state is also complicit, and this is what I'll try to show, that even in the state sector, the coming of the private through public-private partnerships is also something which is being advocated. Now, what I'm actually trying to emphasize is that what is a really serious worry for me and for all of us is that these networks and the advocacy that comes with it is actually reconstructing education for the poor. There is a construction of what is good education for the poor, which is very minimalistic, and which is diluted minimalistic but validated through research and disseminated by very powerful networks. So there are really asymmetries of power between those who are advocating this and those who are to receive it. And what is being stated is that the effort will be to evolve globally scalable models which can be really shown all over the world, and India is a very good laboratory for this, India, Africa and all that. that high quality education at extremely low cost, yet ensuring profits. So that is the kind of what is being projected. Now I also want to argue that because this has happened since 2000, but in 2009 you have the right to education, and I would like to argue that the right to education is the major roadblock to this kind of advocacy, and the government giving into this kind of advocacy and the kind of low cost solutions, because the right to education has some norms for school, for infrastructure, for teacher qualifications and so on. Hence you would also see, which I'd like to show, that part of the effort of this advocacy is to attack the RTE norms and goals. Now when we talk about the poor are, we can, whichever way we define it, the poor are extremely diverse in social terms, economically and social terms. There are also interlocking identities, intersectionality between caste, gender, poverty, etc., geographies of deprivation, and showing that it's a very complex group that we are looking at. Now, why I want to say this is that the advocacy for low cost schooling actually compromises what our imagination of a school would be, what our imagination of curriculum would be, and what our imagination of pedagogy for the more advantaged groups. So this is what I would like to do. Now this is linked to a larger global scenario where since the mid-80s there are education reforms in countries like the US and the UK, where reform is largely in terms of standardized testing, bringing in the private sector, vouchers, and using testing as a very mode of accountability and also to show whether schools are performing or not. Teachers' work has also become the focus of reforms. There are accountability regimes of control, and you find that some of these, if you look at the literature in the UK and USA, you have failing schools and failing teachers, depending on the outcomes for the school leaving tests. And these failing schools are then handed over to the private sector, whether as charter schools or even in the UK they are handed over to charitable schools, etc. and given autonomy to run the schools as they wish, recruit whatever kinds of teachers. So that kind of reform of the so-called inefficient state is already happening there. So what is actually, and what has been also happening to teachers is there is a de-skilling of teachers. There is a kind of control of teachers' work. There is also what you will find is extreme standardization of what is expected of teachers, and this scholars have argued is very detrimental to poor children, because they need a very complex, they need teachers highly qualified who can actually understand the context of poverty and hence are able to teach in such schools. Now in India also we find that some of these trends are visible, and why I am giving this larger context is some of these discourses and these policy changes are being suggested within India also. Now what is the Indian system? Very briefly, and I've dealt with it in great detail in my, it is a very stratified system of government schooling also, and reforms in government schooling for the poor has brought in inferior streams of schooling, and if you look over the last few decades, and today one of the ways in which the government is trying to improve quality is through partnerships with the private sector, not only in infrastructure and say constructing toilets and all that, but also in teacher training, in running schools, some schools are also being adopted by these groups. In fact, the Bombay municipal schools have been actually completely given over to the private sector. Yeah, one thing one has to remember is the RTE does not allow profit making. I mean, that is one of the norms of the RTE, and it also lays down clear deadlines. And 2013 was the year when all schools which were unregulated had to meet the RTE norm. So 2013 was a very crucial year as far as the RTE was concerned. Now let me just come down to, let me discuss now what is the nature of markets in education, the one that I'm talking about. Now in the post 2000, I think, what we find is that the advocacy of for-profit schools, for-profit private schools, English medium, which are advocated to improve the life chances of children of the poor through vouchers, etc. Now, I think a lot of us have heard about James Tooley, who first highlighted these schools, which were called the budget schools because they were run on a budget, minimal budget. And what he found was that in Hyderabad, he says that when he went around Hyderabad, he found these schools which were functioning, which charged barely $2 a day, and they were much better than the government schools. So what he did was to have studies of children from these schools and children from government schools, and he showed that in maths and language, children of these schools were doing much better. Now the cost per child was much lower here because the teachers' salaries also were very low. The implication was that low cost, low fee private schools were better for performing better than state schools. Also, parents were choosing these schools. Hence, it was argued that if these schools were really performing better than the government schools, then the government must support these schools. It must provide vouchers so that children could go to these schools. Also emphasized was that since these schools were making a small profit, if you had enough research and development, you could evolve models whereby a much more efficient running of these private schools, and they would become a profitable business, a business opportunity for those who wish to enter this market. Now, it's a very powerful advocacy, and I'll just show you a sort of a slide on it, because it had transnational roots to think tanks, private foundations, corporate organizations, which propagate a market philosophy and are linked, and they're also linked to pro-choice organizations in India. I'll just show you the kind of networks that you can see here. Yeah. So these are the networks. So you have Tooley here who does his study, right? Now, he is linked to the Center for Civil Society because he then does a study here also. And the Center for Civil Society also has a pro-market, orientation. Then what they do, you have a person called Mitra in NIIT who comes up with something called minimally invasive education, or saying that if you provide, that you don't really need teachers for poor children. If you provide a computer, then children will automatically go to it. So it's called minimally invasive education. Tooley has his own organization in Hyderabad called Educate Trust. That Educate Trust is linked to something called Center for British Teachers in London. And Educate Trust does a lot of work. It was also involved in this Hyderabad research. That Hyderabad research was funded by Templeton Foundation and World Bank to do the study that they did over there. And since they're teaching English, the Center for British Teachers has this thing called Jolly Phonics. So they market the Jolly Phonics here, and that is used in the schools to teach English. So this is now, and Tooley and Dixon, these are the partners who then come to India, do their studies, and then are linked with the Center for Civil Society. They start a school choice campaign, and that school choice campaign by then is beginning to be funded by these multinational organizations. One is Orient Global and Global Legatum. These are Singapore-based companies. They are investment companies who are actually coming in to invest in this low-cost housing and low-cost schooling. So what Orient Global does is it gives money so that they start a program where children in East Delhi are given vouchers. So they call for application, give vouchers. They go to low-cost schools, they immediately start a study and compare these schools with these children with the government school children to show that these children are likely to do better. So that is what they do. Okay. Then you have another investment company called Global Legatum. Now Global Legatum puts in money in the Andhra Pradesh School Choice Project, which I will explain to you, which is actually a collaborative project between the World Bank, Government of Andhra Pradesh and Azim Premji Foundation, and they have 2 or 3 programs to see, looking at whether performance pay for teachers, do teachers do better if they do performance pay? If you have school vouchers, are children going to do much better? So you will see that gradually they are trying to collect some evidence, and you have a lot of Harvard scholars who come to evaluate this. So these are the ones who are coming to evaluate, Karthik, Muralidharan and all, they come to evaluate this. So this is one way, and meanwhile this school choice campaign is going on, and in Bihar and Maharashtra and all that. Then you have self-help groups, and you have something called Opportunity International, which comes in to fund the self-help groups to set up micro schools. So this is the kind of, now these people are linked to networks outside India also. Okay, means, you know, so this is the kind of group. Now you have this huge group which is actually trying to create evidence that low cost schools which have a minimal cost are in demand by parents, and also that children who go to these schools are actually performing far better than children in government schools. Now what Tuli tries to say is that with $80 a year you can run a school per child, $80 per child per year, and the children are paying only $2 a month. So at about 100 rupees a month you can get private high quality English medium education. I mean, that is the argument that they are giving. This is now, this study of his is then quoted worldwide. So it becomes a huge, and everybody is sort of so astounded but so happy that the poor can be educated at 200 rupees a month. I mean, they are just amazed by it, and that the performance is so good. So this is it. And meanwhile, you also have, of course, in government schools, you have the coming in of Microsoft, Evron and all that, to do computer training and all this software. There are, some schools are already being handed over to the private sector, like the Bharti Airtel has the Bharti schools in Rajasthan, somebody else has other schools. So you have a lot of this going on. And you have people like Azim Premji and all that who are entering the government system to bring quality education now. So that is the broad scenario that you have till then. Now subsequently you have these corporate players. Now here you have the advocacy. Then you have corporate players coming in, trying to invest in this business and even to run these schools. So as I said, the RT is the roadblock here. So they are still in around 2007-2008. By then in Africa also you have these low cost schools as chains which are running, and then Tuli is also part of that. So Tuli is he's been called an intellectual entrepreneur. So he's one of the main people who are in that. Now the major focus till 2008 was to build up these transnational networks of organizations and individuals who are advocating parental choice and vouchers. Now, in the discourse in education, school vouchers and parental choice is something which is also happening to a large extent in the UK and USA, much earlier. And the idea was that if you can make school chains can give standardized kind of schooling, it becomes easier. And in fact, the hot dog industry, the pizza industry, that kind of, if you give standardized large scale stuff, you're likely to make profit. So that was the kind of model. So they are obviously looking for a standardized model too. Funds are also mobilized for research and development so that we know how to do this. And you find in 2007, somebody called Richard Chandler, who is I think one of these global wala, gives 100 million to create this education fund, which will actually go into how to develop these chains. Now by 2008 to 10, we see that low cost we see corporate houses coming to establish these chains and how to build brands. So there also you have a few people like the Grey Matters Capital and all, who then are doing studies in Hyderabad, how to build a brand, because poor people cannot understand. But if you had something like a brand, a brand, then of course they'll know it's a good school. So in 2007, Chandler sets up the Rumi budget schools, because budget schools are then projected, these are called budget schools, as a profitable thing. They set up budget schools. Now Career Launcher, which is known for setting up high-end coaching center, sets up the Indus Budget Academies. The SPS Microfinance Group sets up the Bodhi Academies, and they all have these very nice names, Rumi, Bodhi and all that. And Reddy Labs establishes the Pudami schools. Okay. Now these schools are largely primary level and they are called academies. Now I will show you later that by then in the UK, the Absolute Return for Kids, an organization, is setting up academies. So they are not called schools as such, they are called academies. Now these are mainly at the primary level. By now the tuition fee is not $1, $2, it's about $3 to $4 a month. It's slowly gone up. Now by 2011, they realized that really this is not working. They were not getting the profits because teachers were so badly, they were not trained, it was really not. So there you find that they then shift the market segment. So this is it, 2007 and 8. So here's Chandler, Career Launcher, Microfinance, Reddy Labs. And 2010-11 this bubble bursts. And they realized that this bottom of the pyramid, the poorest, they are really not going to get a profit for them at this 100 to 100. So there are new set of schools coming which are called affordable private schools. And they are around 600 rupees per month. So then you find that the career launcher, Rumi then gets out of it. He realizes I am not getting any money out of it. Career Launcher then shuts down the Indus Budget Academies, and they now have started something in rural Andhra Pradesh. Here the fee range is 600 to 700. And then you find these are these other organized groups called Umbyar Network, which is runs eBay, Song, S-O-N-G, Career Launcher. Now they are not only doing budget academies, they also have elite schools. So Career Launcher has its Indus World Schools. Okay, and Song has its Gautam low-cost schools and Titania exclusive schools. So you are having the same people with two different kinds of schools. Now the idea of school chains by then has really come up, and you find that Song, Umbyar and Pearson who comes into publishing, have now started school chains in Africa. And these are called the Bridge and Omega schools. Now, it's important to know that all these corporate organizations are trying in India also to try and see that there is a more conducive regulatory system. So there's a lot of work that they try to reduce, because we are supposed to have a very strong, though of course it's not followed and there's a lot of bribing, but there is a regulatory system in place for norms and things like that. So here you have the Bridge and the Omega schools, and here the idea is that to have ultra low cost for profit primary schools, so that the schools profitably deliver high quality education for less than $4 per month, enabling local school managers to operate their school businesses profitably while creating a highly successful business at the central level. So you'll find that these two have become very important, Bridge and Omega. And Omega again says that we think it's possible for a private company to educate the poor at a profit and provide high quality education at the lowest cost possible. Now how is it that you get profit, and how is it that you are able to go to scale with chains? Now you will find that if you really go to there's no studies, but if you go to the website, you will find that what they are really doing is to standardize to the extreme what is happening in the classes. So you will have, what they call is the model is called paraskilling. That is, you disaggregate a process in such a way that someone who's not highly qualified will be able to do it. it will become a routine and standardized task. Hence, less skilled workers can take it up with the desired reduction in costs and volume and output. Now, this is what they use for probably for business. Here, what is done is that high school graduates or those who class 10 and 11 are trained to impart a lesson, while someone is there to provide the inputs. So this is what is said, that in the Bridge Academy, which is there in those either Kenya or one of these places, in the Bridge Academies which are there, every single second grade teacher in every Bridge Academy will be teaching the exact same lesson supplied with a word for word script from Bridge headquarters delivered by these NOOC readers. So what they do is that from a centralized place, the lecture comes on that reader, and the teacher, who's a young person, is basically reading, transacting it. So you will find that gradually the conception of the school teacher is also changing. Here is a teacher who's just delivering. And so of course the notions of quality, what really are you talking about in terms of quality in these schools? Now, it is important that when Tooley in 2003, his major emphasis was that these schools are of high quality and they are of a better quality than those going to government school. But by 2009, it was quite clear that quality in at least the Indian unregulated schools was very poor. And also that there was a rapid turnover of teachers. For 100, 200, they will move from one school to another. And also that it was supposed to be English medium schools, but these teachers could barely speak English. So the quality was a big problem in these schools. Yeah. Sorry, this is just one more on this. The way in which, they create workbooks, they create, content. So basically they are teacher proofing the classroom, meaning anybody can go and just impart this. So he says, we combine the experience and expertise of a critical number of education specialists with trained, passionate and energetic high school graduates to deliver quality teaching and learning in our schools. Okay, so these are the Omega schools. Yeah. Now in India you find that the Gyanshala, I don't know whether anybody's heard of Gyanshala, but Gyanshala is in Gujarat and they use this paraskilling model. They also are giving education at $3 a month, and they also are sort of publicizing that their children perform far better than government schools, and this is being scaled up in the state of Gujarat. It's also a model that is being advocated in Bihar also. Now, what is really being suggested is that poor children can learn with minimum intervention for teachers, teacher proofing of schools. Now, hole in the wall, minimally invasive education is this by this Mitra person from NIIT. And Mitra, Tooley and Dixon are a kind of team. Now, what Mitra, who today has got the TED Prize because he has organized self-organized learning environments, meaning that children will organize themselves and learn. And so he has been given that TED Prize for that he has come up with this. He has also something called Granny and in the Cloud, meaning in Bengal, in the, what is that, that marshy, what's that place?
Sundarbans.
In the Sundarbans. The grannies in London will read them stories through the cloud. So he has got a prize for that also. So this is it. Now, so this is what we find till 2009-10. Now, as you're coming close to the RTE deadline, 2013, we find that something else is happening. Because there is a fear that these schools might be closed down, what has to be shown is that the budget schools or the low-cost schools, one is that they are as good as government schools. Second, that they use effective, what they call micro-innovations, which improves learner outcomes. Now, a lot of their work is learner outcomes through testing. They are showing testing. Now, what they are saying is these teachers are not trained, but they use very innovative innovations. And if you use those innovations, if you identify these innovations, get them tested by JPAL in MIT or some other university in the UK and find the best innovation, then you can actually embed those innovations in government and other schools, and they will perform much better. So that is it. And hence you can have low cost models for good quality education for the poor. Now you have to upscale. So for one is you have to identify these innovations, test them, are they good or not, then embed them in the government system, upscale them, and show that, you know, these innovations lead to better learner outcomes, and the private budget private schools. So obviously to say that if the low cost schools are really performing better than government schools, then why are you closing them down? So that is a major thing. So then you find in 2011, because RTE is the made road law, you have Center for Civil Society coming up with something called the Progressive Action Committee. Like Modi, you will find there are innumerable acronyms, PACT. And CCS and civil society has NISA, National Alliance of School Alliance, Independent School Alliance. What is the major thing? That the image and voice of budget schools has to be raised. You have to link with media, you have to link with researchers, you have to link with academics. Now, then they create, so these are linked to something called STIR. STIR is students and teachers innovating for results. These are the ones doing the micro innovations. Now, STIR has a STIR India and STIR Global. So, STIR India is linked to STIR Global, and that's the idea is that if you embed this in government schools and then you make inroads in government schools, you adopt government schools, then the government doesn't have any answer that, yeah, you're good enough, so why should we? And in fact, why don't you enter the government school system? Okay. So then you see in 2011 and 12, this Progressive Action Committee, PACT, the school, the National School, Independent School Alliance, and students and teachers innovating for results. So they are upscaling, budgeting, etc. And NISA is then linked to STIR and STIR Global. And all these actors in this are also those who were part of that earlier group also. You'll find this. So STIR India has ARK, it has British Council, it has Pearson, it has Akansha, it has J-PAL, that is that in MIT you have that Poverty Action Lab. Now they are doing all the studies through these whatever testing, and you have McKinsey and many others. The Global Forum has the advisory, has the Director of Education, World Bank, Director E.G. West Center, which I think is Tooley, Special Advisor to the Secretary. Now the Ofsted, which is the British Department for Standards in Education, is also linked to ARK. They are also part of all this. And then you have the Brookings Institute, then you have something else called GEMS, and you have of course the country director ARK for kids. Now all of this, these people are there to push this. So you can imagine what a powerful group it is, and all of them will have links with the Government of India to put this through. Now I just want to show you about ARK. This is the Absolute Return for Kids. It's linked to ARK UK, which started in 2003. They are hedge fund managers who lost out in that recession. Now they have something called Absolute Return for Kids, and they run academies in the UK. They are given these academies, they run these schools, and they have a range of programs which they run. Now they come to India through Tooley and set up their base in that same East Delhi where he did all his studies. So you have ARK India. They have two programs, many programs, sorry. They have two programs. One is Enable. Enable is those you're giving education vouchers, children go to school and you test. Person who is running the program and testing is again this Tooley and Dixon are testing, and then they find that these children are doing better than in government schools. Tooley and Dixon were involved in the Hyderabad schools. Okay. And of course I told you they are using this Genki English which has come from CFBT. Another program is Aspire. This is low cost English language teaching through these phonics, those cassettes, right? Jolly Phonics. Now they have now linked with SSA in Meghalaya, so they are using it there, Bharati schools and many others. And they also have a program called Teaching Educators and Teaching Leaders or something, where they find young people, give them some training and make them leaders in school. This also they are trying in Pune. So this is the kind of, now ARK is a key player in this STIR Global, etc., etc. Now, their main thing is to have affordable private schools and also upscaling these innovations into government schools. Okay. Now, so this is broadly the kind of model that they are looking for. Now, you see, the thing is that the profits come because of teachers and that low cost, the kind of training, etc., of teachers, etc. And we have to go back to critical educators who actually say that it is the labor and intellectual skills of the teacher and her understanding of diverse contexts which are absolutely crucial for disadvantaged children. But here, where their attempt is to teacher-proof the schools, ensure that the teacher doesn't make a difference at all in the way, especially for underprivileged. Now, what about the parents? Nobody's bothered because half these schools have also closed down and they are moving into different markets. What about, now, a key aspect of this is research. Oh, sorry, I wanted to also tell you, this is what I saw yesterday. Something else has come up called the Education Alliance. So, the Education Alliance is in 2014 is so that private school operators can thrive and expand, and where governments can hold private partners accountable for delivering high quality education. So, what are the objectives? Collate and disseminate evidence of PPP and shape the PPP thing. Stimulate the school operator pipeline, ensure quality education. And you look at who's the country director of that, is the ARK person. And then you have Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, Center Square Foundation, Umbyar Network. And this is another one. And there's also one more, it's called righttoeducation.com, which again I saw yesterday. And it's asking that please petition the minister to amend the RTE Act. This is going on every day, So I think there's really a lot of work going on. Now, what about research? I've done a little bit on research. I think it's very important to know that without research, their low-cost advocacy is very weak. Because in no part of the world have vouchers succeeded. In no part of the world has this parental choice thing succeeded. What they have to do is to really show that children, if you use these policies, the children are doing better than the average child in government schools, and they use this randomized control trials, with a control group, another group, and do a lot of complicated statistics. And they get very generous funding. Templeton Foundation funded truly £80,000. It's all in that. And I was telling someone ICSSR gives 4 lakhs of rupees for a study. And World Bank, and there are pro-market foundations, philanthropic foundations, and not. So all of this, Pearson has their own. Pearson has its own, foundation, and all of them have it. Now, in Andhra Pradesh, what is it? Andhra Pradesh Research, I'm forgetting what the whole APRES, there was a randomized experimental something, I'll give you the whole thing, was the one that I showed you in that diagram. You remember where there was the World Bank and various people coming in Andhra Pradesh. So in 2009, they had this project to see whether private options would help in policy, and they had a huge study. One is about school vouchers and performance pay. Like if you pay teachers based on the performance of the child, then will the general performance go up? That kind of thing. Now, in the recent reviews of studies, there is now more recently, I'm sorry, do I have it here? No. Now, what happened with this Andhra Pradesh study? Only now we have the results of the study. See, we may have a problem with the study because it is absolutely a decontextualized study and you just don't know what is going on in that study. But it so happens that even according to that study, a huge study which was carried out by Azim Premji and evaluated by the Jaypal characters, even that study shows that the children who got the vouchers and went to private schools have not done better than those who remained in government schools. That is one thing which is very clear, and we are at great pains to explain how this could have happened. Okay, so that is one, and that is the second thing is that performance pay for teachers. They say that where teachers were paid for children's performance and not paid, those who paid where they were paid, they were doing a little better. But if you look at the study carefully, they say very clearly that there was no change in teacher practices in the class. Nothing changed in the class. So you will be wondering, how did children do well? And they have written this quite honestly, that unprompted views of teachers said that they took some classes after school, or they gave more tests, which means that teachers were probably taking tuitions, and also they were testing, that's all. So, I mean, the question is, what kind of change do you want to bring with some of these reforms? Okay, so I'm just saying that now the problem is that these studies have not been critically examined by academics. The studies have conceptual problems. Tully's study has had severe conceptual methodological problems, but they have been taken and used all over the world, right? So I feel that here what we are doing is that, according to their own reviews, there is no equity or quality advantage. Quality is a problem. Even equity in terms of whether the poor are really doing better in these schools is also not given, right? But the advocacy is used for, but the evidence is used for advocacy, and also to show that the government schools are not doing well as private schools. Now, these are broadly some of the things that I have looked at. And just to try to sum up, I think that one has to look at, the kind of enormous kinds of change that is coming in terms of policy networks, in terms of the landscape of education, and also the deliberate misconstruction of what is good education. Now, you will find repeatedly saying that it is good quality education for the poor. It is good quality education at low cost. It's good quality education that can actually bring profit. But if you actually look at what is being given, it is a very minimalistic curriculum and largely learner outcome. And there is enough research, some research to say that if you emphasize on learner outcomes only, then there is greater teaching to the test and very narrow curriculums in the class. So that is one thing which is. Secondly is that it is homogenized and standardized. Will homogenized and standardized education really, can you give this education to the poor? Okay. And what is happening to teachers? These teachers are getting de-skilled, deprofessionalized. The idea that anybody can become a teacher, the whole career of teachers and teacher professionalism, something we are just building in India now, is something that is being attacked and actually trying. And of course, the fact that the same organization is giving different kinds of education to different kinds of people, right? The role of powerful networks also important, because I'll come to that this is something new and this is something that we haven't studied and we really don't know how to study it. That's the powerful networks that come in, the construction of discourses, etc. So now, what really do we look at? What is really what one really has to look at the end of this is that what really is the purpose of education? What really is it that is there something intrinsically good about education like we all thought, or is it going to depend on how much you can invest for your child? And is it really returns going to be in relation to how much you can invest, whether in terms of schools that cost more and schools that cost less? What about the issue of social justice? Now, you will find that equity is a major aspect, a major part of this advocacy, but that equity is measured in terms of tests. It is in terms of testing. Who does well, who does not? Do people from lower socio-economic backgrounds do better in testing or not? There is very little critical academic scrutiny of studies being done for advocacy and business, and I think that is an important aspect which academics have to come in, because most of these studies are taken as received wisdom and it has been rarely critiqued. What are the conceptual frameworks and methodology to understand this? Here are very powerful networks. There are flows, there are narratives, there are discourses, there's construction of truth, different regimes of truth. How really will you study that? Those of us who are used to studying things which are cross-sectional or even over a period of time, something is constantly on the move. I think that's also important. Now when we are critiquing whatever we are seeing and we are talking about public education, what is this public that we are advocating? Was the public in the 70s and 80s really, was that a socially just public education? It was not. Half the Indian population was not in schools. The most disadvantaged children were not in schools. It is only when the middle classes moved out that these children came in, and that system cannot cope with these people. It has not really, we have not been able to create a system which can actually proactively support those who come from more disadvantaged backgrounds. So when we are talking about public, rather than being nostalgic and romantic about that public, one has to be very critical about that public, because that public was very, whether it's gender, caste, etc., it is only because of struggles of some groups that people entered those systems, and now that system is not prepared to take this group. But what is being given in return, like this private, it is this that one says is not correct. It is this that is unjust, right? So some people very often ask, but what about the public? It is true, the public has not delivered, but the public is justiciable. The public has some norms. The public can be held up, while the private cannot. Nothing about the private can be looked at. Now, so what? Now, if you actually look at the data, though the general assumption is that everything has become private, but 75% is still public. They are stratified. There are elite public schools, Kendriya Vidyalayas, Navodayas, and all are there. But you still have around 75% going to the. So it is still a fairly robust public school system. So it cannot be written off. What is the public in schooling on the agenda? And I think that is something which we are still to look at, both in terms of quality of teacher education or parental aspirations. What is the role of the state? And if you look at the role of the state, it is extremely complicit, because in addition to not regulating the private, there is space now provided for every sort of private to enter the government schools, including teacher training, Teach for India, whatever. So it makes the public school system a very fragmented kind of system where anybody comes in to do whatever they wish. Yet the systems of accountability are being set in government systems. So even teachers who want to perform in government system are finding it difficult to perform. So I think that, and then the testing has come in, and whether it's Pearson or any of them or CFBT is coming in to test. So we have to be careful. The same testing will happen, the same failing of schools, the same handing over of failed schools to private will happen. This is what's happening in the Bombay Municipal Corporation, is happening in Rajasthan, happening everywhere. So I think we have to be careful about that. There is quality in government schools like the KVs, Navodayas, etc. Okay, but there is this, as I said, with the coming of the private-public partnerships, contractualization, casualization, Teach for India, this thing is coming out. Now, we are not saying that the non-state must be kept out. The non-state has a social responsibility. The non-state has to come in. Under the RT, you have to do 25%. But in addition to that, the non-state must come in to provide. If Tuli and company were to give Sardar Patel Vidyalayas to the poor, we'd be only happy about it. But what they are giving is a very diluted, simplistic kind of education, which is really not an education, and that is what, and standardized, and that is what we want to be. You see, the idea, it truly says at the end that if I succeed in India, then I will succeed in the world. So if I can form the school chains in India, I can form it anywhere in the world. So I think that is important to look at. And of course, right in the end, we are not saying that the elite schools, there is quality of education. Quality is something else. In terms of certain standards that are seen as desirable, the children are performing well there. But whether they are good citizens, good human beings, that is another question. So, yeah, and I had just in my conclusion said that, you had, the idea of social justice in education, what education is for the poor. I said we should go back to people like Ambedkar and Phule and Gramsci, that education was to build a certain kind of individual who would be an active citizen, who would be a critical person, who would have that third eye, who could understand. So, but the kind of education that you're going to get through this low-cost private is nothing. You may become a better consumer, but you are unlikely to become a better. So I have just said that we have to keep that in mind, so that the system of education gives that. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.